The smirk on her face is burned into my memory, a brand on my soul. I remember the bass thumping through the floor, the flashing lights painting her victory in neon, the clinking of champagne glasses celebrating my downfall. I stood outside, the city rain washing away what little dignity I had left, watching her raise a toast. They thought they had won. They thought I was gone for good, just a stain they could scrub away. If you would give anything to protect your sister, subscribe now. The nightclub, Obsidian, had been my life. Not just a job, but my creation, my passion poured into every detail, from the handcrafted cocktails to the cutting-edge music. I had climbed from barback to manager, breathing life into the space, transforming it from a dive into the hottest spot in the city. Then Vanessa arrived, the CEO's wife, dripping in diamonds and entitlement, deciding Obsidian would be her new playground. At first, it was subtle. Demands for special treatment, whispered complaints about the staff, a constant undercurrent of dissatisfaction that poisoned the atmosphere. Then came the whispers, insidious rumors spread through her social circle, painting me as unprofessional, untrustworthy, even unstable. Lies, carefully crafted to undermine my reputation, to sever the relationships I had built. The clientele dwindled. The staff became wary, unsure of where their loyalties should lie. My name is Madeline, and I was drowning, watching everything I had worked for slip through my fingers, poisoned by Vanessa's venom. I was forced to resign, the pressure unbearable, the atmosphere toxic. I swallowed my pride and took a job as waitstaff at a different club, a dimly lit, sticky-floored imitation of what Obsidian had been. The humiliation was constant, a daily reminder of my fall. I would see Vanessa's picture in the society pages, always smiling, always at Obsidian, basking in the glow of my stolen success. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to focus on taking orders, on cleaning tables, on enduring the endless parade of drunken patrons. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was above it. But every night, as I watched the wealthy elite celebrate, I felt the burning ember of resentment grow hotter. It was a slow burn, a simmering rage that threatened to consume me. They celebrated my defeat, reveling in my misery. They saw me as nothing more than a servant, a ghost of my former self, a cautionary tale whispered among their circles. The person I trusted most, my supposed friend and confidant Amelia, was one of them. I found out later that Amelia had been feeding Vanessa information, amplifying the rumors, twisting my words. Amelia, who I had confided in, who I had considered my closest ally in the viper's nest that Obsidian had become. The betrayal cut deeper than Vanessa's lies, sharper than the loss of my career. It was Amelia who had finalized my downfall. I realized then that this wasn't just about a job or a club or a reputation. It was about power, about control, about the casual cruelty of those who believed themselves untouchable. And that was a mistake they would come to regret. The sleepless nights began. The club's music, once my inspiration, now echoed in my head, a mocking soundtrack to my failure. I tossed and turned, replaying every conversation with Vanessa, every interaction with Amelia, searching for the moment I had misstepped, the point where I had become the target. But there was no clear answer, no single mistake to pinpoint. It was a calculated campaign, a slow, deliberate erosion of my life. During the day, the weight of injustice pressed down on me, a suffocating blanket of despair. I tried to talk to my sister Sarah, but I couldn't bring myself to explain the full extent of the betrayal. I downplayed it, framing it as a simple job loss, a personality conflict with a difficult boss. I couldn't bear to burden her with the truth, with the knowledge that I had been so easily manipulated, so utterly defeated. Sarah, ever the optimist, encouraged me to move on, to focus on the future. "You're talented, Madeline," she said, her voice full of unwavering faith. "You'll find something even better." But I knew, deep down, that it wasn't just about finding another job. It was about reclaiming what had been stolen from me, about restoring my honor, about making them understand the consequences of their actions. I applied for other management positions, tailoring my resume, crafting compelling cover letters, but the rejections piled up, each one a fresh wound. Vanessa's whispers had spread further than I imagined, poisoning the well, closing doors I didn't even know existed. I considered confronting Vanessa directly, demanding an explanation, pleading for her to stop. But I knew it would be futile. She would deny everything, twisting my words, portraying me as unstable, as delusional. It would only make things worse. So I started documenting everything. Every interaction with former colleagues who hinted at Vanessa's machinations, every social media post celebrating Obsidian's success under her reign, every pang of humiliation I felt while serving drinks to people who used to respect me. I started a detailed journal, meticulously recording dates, times, names, and specific instances of sabotage. It was a slow, painstaking process, but it gave me a sense of control, a feeling that I wasn't completely powerless. I reached out to old contacts, subtly probing for information about Vanessa and Amelia, trying to understand their motivations, searching for any weakness, any vulnerability. Most people were hesitant to talk, afraid of crossing Vanessa, but a few, the ones who had witnessed her behavior firsthand, offered veiled hints, cryptic warnings. They spoke of her ambition, her ruthlessness, her insatiable need for validation. They suggested that Amelia was equally driven, equally willing to do whatever it took to climb the social ladder. These whispers confirmed my suspicions, solidifying my resolve. This wasn't just about getting my job back. It was about exposing their true nature, about revealing the darkness that lurked beneath their polished surfaces. One evening, while working my shift, I overheard a conversation between two patrons, regulars at Obsidian, discussing a recent incident involving Vanessa. They spoke in hushed tones, their words laced with gossip and speculation. Apparently, Vanessa had made a series of questionable financial decisions, using company funds for personal expenses, blurring the lines between business and pleasure. The details were vague, but the implications were clear. She was playing a dangerous game, one that could have serious consequences. My ears perked up. This could be it, the crack in their perfect facade, the leverage I needed to turn the tables. I discreetly recorded the conversation on my phone, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I needed more concrete evidence, irrefutable proof of their wrongdoing. I knew that obtaining such information would be risky, potentially dangerous, but I was willing to do whatever it took. The thought of exposing them, of watching their carefully constructed world crumble around them, fueled my determination. The humiliation, the sleepless nights, the crushing weight of injustice, it would all be worth it. I had to find a way to make them pay. My plan was beginning to take shape. I had to be patient. The rejections mounted, each one a tiny hammer blow against my spirit. The savings dwindled. The waitstaff job barely covered rent and food. I started skipping meals, pretending I wasn't hungry when Sarah came to visit. I saw the worry in her eyes, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. I knew I couldn't keep up the charade for long. One rainy Tuesday, after a particularly brutal shift dealing with obnoxious patrons and condescending managers, I came home to an eviction notice taped to my door. The weight of it all crashed down on me, an avalanche of despair. I sank to the floor, the damp concrete cold against my skin, and wept. Not the quiet, dignified tears of grief, but the raw, guttural sobs of utter defeat. I had lost everything. My career, my reputation, my home. I was alone, penniless, and utterly broken. That night I stared at the city lights, the glittering skyline that had once represented opportunity and success now mocking my failure. The rain continued to fall, washing away the last vestiges of hope. A darkness crept into my mind, a whisper suggesting that perhaps it would be easier to simply give up, to let the darkness consume me. The thought was terrifying, but also strangely alluring, a siren song promising an end to the pain. I thought of Sarah, of the disappointment in her eyes if I were to simply vanish. I thought of Vanessa, of her smug smile, of her triumph over my broken spirit. And then something shifted. A spark ignited in the darkness, a flicker of defiance. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was something akin to it. It was anger, pure and unadulterated. An icy resolve began to solidify in my core. They wanted me gone, they wanted me broken. They would soon learn that they had made a terrible mistake. I spent the next few days in a daze, moving through the motions of my life, but with a newfound sense of purpose. I packed my belongings, selling what I could for a pittance, storing the rest in Sarah's already cramped apartment. I quit the waitstaff job, unable to stomach another minute of servitude. I cut off all contact with former colleagues and acquaintances, severing the last ties to my old life. I needed to disappear, to become a ghost, to operate in the shadows, unseen and unheard. I started researching Vanessa and Amelia, digging deeper into their backgrounds, their finances, their personal lives. I scoured public records, social media accounts, online forums, piecing together a comprehensive picture of their activities. I learned about Vanessa's extravagant spending habits, her secret debts, her volatile temper. I discovered that Amelia had a history of manipulating people, of using her charm and intelligence to get ahead, regardless of the consequences. I found whispers of past indiscretions, of broken promises and shattered lives left in their wake. The more I learned, the more disgusted I became. Their carefully constructed facade of respectability was nothing more than a house of cards, built on lies and deceit. It was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. I needed to find the right pressure point, the weakness that would bring their whole world crumbling down. I knew that going to the authorities was out of the question. Vanessa had connections, influence. She would bury any investigation, twisting the narrative, painting me as a disgruntled former employee seeking revenge. I needed to be smarter, more strategic. I needed to play their game, but on my own terms. I started to formulate a plan, a meticulous strategy designed to expose their true nature, to dismantle their empire, to make them pay for what they had done to me. It was a risky plan, fraught with danger, but I was past the point of caring. I had nothing left to lose. I would become their shadow, their tormentor, their worst nightmare. I would use their own weapons against them, turning their lies and manipulations back on themselves. I would expose their secrets, their betrayals, their hidden agendas. I would dismantle their empire piece by piece until nothing remained but ashes. The plan required patience, discipline, and a complete disregard for my own safety. It would take months, perhaps even years, to execute, but I was willing to wait. I would bide my time, gathering information, building my case, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. I would transform myself, shedding my old skin, becoming someone unrecognizable, someone capable of anything. I would become the architect of their downfall. The old Madeline was gone. In her place stood a woman forged in the fires of betrayal, fueled by rage and driven by a singular purpose: revenge. They had broken me, but in doing so, they had created a monster. And that monster was coming for them. The smirk on Vanessa's face would be replaced by fear, and Amelia's backstabbing ways would be her undoing. My time was coming. I smiled. I played their game, attending social events at Obsidian, acting as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't lost everything. I even feigned enthusiasm for Vanessa's latest improvements to the club, praising her questionable taste in decor and her even more questionable management decisions. But beneath the surface, I was recording everything. Every word, every gesture, every subtle power play. I invested in a miniature voice recorder, disguised as a piece of jewelry, that captured every conversation within a 10-foot radius. I strategically wore it to every event, positioning myself near Vanessa and Amelia, discreetly gathering evidence of their schemes. I learned how to extract audio from security cameras, bypassing passwords and manipulating digital files. I spent hours studying forensic accounting, learning how to trace financial transactions, to identify discrepancies, to uncover hidden assets. It was a crash course in corporate espionage, fueled by my burning desire for retribution. The information I gathered was damning. Vanessa had been siphoning funds from Obsidian for months, using the money to finance her lavish lifestyle, to pay off gambling debts, to invest in failing business ventures. Amelia had been complicit in the scheme, helping Vanessa to cover her tracks, manipulating financial records, and silencing anyone who raised questions. I discovered emails, text messages, and handwritten notes that documented their conspiracy in excruciating detail. It was a treasure trove of evidence, enough to bring their entire world crashing down. One close call occurred during a charity gala at Obsidian. I was mingling with the crowd, casually observing Vanessa and Amelia as they schmoozed with potential investors. Vanessa, emboldened by champagne, began bragging about her business acumen, exaggerating Obsidian's profits and making outrageous claims about future expansion plans. I moved closer, subtly positioning myself to capture her words on my hidden recorder. Suddenly, Amelia turned and looked directly at me, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. She excused herself from the conversation and walked towards me, her expression unreadable. My heart pounded in my chest. Had she figured out my plan? Was I about to be exposed? Madeline, she said, her voice smooth as silk. It's so good to see you. I was just telling Vanessa how much we miss having you around. I forced a smile, trying to appear nonchalant. Thank you, Amelia. That's very kind of you to say. She paused, her gaze unwavering. You know, Vanessa and I were just discussing some new opportunities at Obsidian. We were wondering if you might be interested in coming back on board, in a consulting role perhaps. My mind raced. Was this a genuine offer or a trap? Was she trying to lure me back into their web to keep me under their control? That's very generous of you, I replied, carefully choosing my words. But I'm afraid I'm not available at the moment. I'm currently pursuing other opportunities. She smiled, a cold, calculating smile that sent a shiver down my spine. Of course, she said. We understand, but the offer stands. Anytime you change your mind, just let us know. She turned and walked away, leaving me shaken and unnerved. I knew then that I was playing a dangerous game, that Vanessa and Amelia were not to be underestimated. I started using a VPN and burner phones. I created encrypted email accounts, communicating only through secure channels. I researched surveillance techniques, learning how to detect hidden cameras, to bypass security systems, to move undetected through public spaces. It was like something out of a spy movie, but it was my reality. I was living a double life, pretending to be a harmless bystander while secretly plotting their destruction. The anticipation was a constant companion, a mixture of excitement and dread. I knew that the moment I unleashed my plan, there would be no turning back. The fallout would be immense, potentially affecting not only Vanessa and Amelia, but also their families, their friends, their entire social circle. But I couldn't let that deter me. They had shown me no mercy, and I would show them none. My sister Sarah remained a source of worry. I made excuses not to spend too much time with her. I didn't want her unwittingly dragged into the crossfire. I knew she wouldn't approve of my actions, of the lengths I was willing to go to exact my revenge. She would urge me to forgive them, to move on, to find peace. But I couldn't. Not yet. The injustice was too great, the pain too deep. I needed to see them suffer, to witness their downfall, to reclaim what they had stolen from me. One evening, I was reviewing financial records I had copied from Vanessa's computer. I had used a keystroke logger to obtain her password, and a sophisticated hacking tool to bypass the firewall. As I sifted through the data, I discovered a series of transactions that caught my eye. They were transfers to offshore accounts, located in countries with strict banking secrecy laws. The amounts were substantial, totaling millions of dollars. I traced the funds back to a shell corporation registered in the British Virgin Islands, a known haven for money laundering. It was the smoking gun I had been searching for. This was more than just embezzlement. This was a full-blown criminal enterprise, with implications that extended far beyond Obsidian. I knew that if I exposed this, Vanessa and Amelia would face not only social ruin but also serious legal consequences. The thought sent a surge of satisfaction through me. The trap was set. All that remained was to spring it. I chose the perfect moment. I scheduled a meeting with a former colleague from Obsidian, Liam, someone I knew had always been skeptical of Vanessa and Amelia's methods. He had been quietly sidelined after questioning some of their financial decisions, and I suspected he might be willing to help me expose them. I reached out to him through an encrypted messaging app, hinting that I had evidence of wrongdoing and suggesting a discreet meeting at a neutral location. He agreed, and we met at a small, out-of-the-way diner on the outskirts of the city. As soon as we sat down, I could see the apprehension in his eyes. He was nervous, unsure of what I was about to reveal. I didn't waste any time. I laid out the evidence I had gathered, the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the siphoned funds. His eyes widened as he examined the documents, his expression shifting from disbelief to outrage. He confirmed my suspicions about Vanessa and Amelia, revealing additional details about their shady dealings and their abuse of power. He also told me about other employees who had been mistreated or silenced, individuals who might be willing to testify against them. Liam agreed to help me, offering to connect me with these former employees and to provide additional information about Vanessa and Amelia's activities. His inside knowledge was invaluable, filling in the gaps in my investigation and providing me with a clearer picture of their criminal enterprise. He was risking his career, his reputation, and potentially his safety by helping me, but he was driven by a sense of justice, a desire to see Vanessa and Amelia held accountable for their actions. With Liam's help, the net was tightening. It was almost time. The next step was to decide how to release the information. I considered going to the authorities, but I knew that Vanessa's connections and influence could potentially compromise any investigation. Instead, I decided to take a more unconventional approach. I created a website, anonymously registered through a proxy server, dedicated to exposing Vanessa and Amelia's crimes. I called it Obsidian Unmasked, a name that would send shivers down their spines. On the website, I posted the evidence I had gathered, the financial records, the emails, the text messages, the witness statements. I presented the information in a clear and concise manner, making it easy for anyone to understand the scope of their wrongdoing. I also included a detailed account of my own experience, of how I had been unfairly dismissed, of how my reputation had been tarnished. I wanted people to understand the personal cost of their actions, to see the human impact of their greed and corruption. I knew that launching the website was a risky move, that it could potentially expose me to legal action or even physical harm. But I was willing to take the risk. I had come too far to back down now. I wanted everyone to know the truth about Vanessa and Amelia. They needed to pay for the darkness they brought. I carefully planned the launch of the website, timing it to coincide with Obsidian's annual charity gala, a high-profile event attended by the city's elite. I knew that the gala would be heavily covered by the local media, providing the perfect platform to expose Vanessa and Amelia's crimes to a wide audience. I sent anonymous tips to several journalists, alerting them to the existence of the website and encouraging them to investigate its contents. I also created social media accounts under false names, spreading the word about the website and encouraging people to share it with their networks. The goal was to create a media firestorm, to make it impossible for Vanessa and Amelia to ignore the allegations against them. I knew that they would try to discredit me, to dismiss the website as the work of a disgruntled former employee. But I had anticipated their response, and I had prepared a counter-strategy. I had gathered evidence of their past indiscretions, of their lies and manipulations, of their attempts to silence anyone who challenged them. I would use this information to expose their true character, to show the world that they were not the respectable businesswomen they pretended to be. The day of the gala arrived, and I felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. I spent the morning monitoring the website traffic, watching as the number of visitors steadily increased. The journalists I had contacted were starting to investigate the allegations, reaching out to Vanessa and Amelia for comment. The social media accounts were buzzing with activity as people shared the website and expressed their outrage at the revelations. Everything was proceeding according to plan. As the evening approached, I got ready to attend the gala. I knew that my presence would be provocative, that it would send a clear message to Vanessa and Amelia that I was not afraid of them. I dressed in a sleek black dress, a symbol of my transformation from victim to avenger. I wore the hidden recorder disguised as a necklace to capture any incriminating conversations. I arrived at the gala just as the red carpet was getting underway. The paparazzi were out in full force, snapping photos of the arriving guests. I walked past them, head held high, ignoring their shouts and questions. I entered the ballroom, and the atmosphere was electric. The city's elite were gathered, dressed in their finest attire, sipping champagne and exchanging pleasantries. Vanessa and Amelia were holding court near the entrance, greeting guests with their usual charm and sophistication. They looked confident, untouchable. But I knew that their world was about to come crashing down. I made my way through the crowd, subtly positioning myself to observe Vanessa and Amelia. I could see the tension in their faces, the slight tremor in their hands. They knew something was up. They could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the undercurrent of suspicion and unease. The website was starting to have an impact. Suddenly, Vanessa's phone rang. She answered it, her expression turning grave. She listened intently for a few moments, then hung up, her face ashen. She turned to Amelia, whispering something in her ear. Amelia's eyes widened in disbelief. They both stared at me. I met their gaze, a cold, triumphant smile spreading across my face. They knew. They knew that I was the one who had exposed them. The game was over. Vanessa grabbed Amelia's arm, pulling her towards a side exit. They were trying to escape to avoid the inevitable fallout, but it was too late. As they reached the door, a voice boomed through the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" It was Liam. He had managed to gain access to the gala, and he was standing on the stage, holding a microphone. "I have an important announcement to make," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "I am here tonight to expose the truth about Vanessa and Amelia, to reveal the crimes they have committed against this community." Vanessa and Amelia froze, their faces contorted with rage and panic. They were trapped. There was no escape. Liam began to detail their crimes, laying out the evidence I had gathered, the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the siphoned funds. The room fell silent as the guests listened in stunned silence. The journalists were scribbling furiously, their cameras flashing. The world was watching, and Vanessa and Amelia's carefully constructed world was crumbling before their eyes. Liam's voice echoed through the stunned silence as he recounted the details of Vanessa and Amelia's elaborate scheme, the illicit transfers, the hidden accounts, the lives they had callously manipulated. The color drained from Vanessa's face as she stood paralyzed, the carefully constructed facade of success and respectability shattering into a million pieces. Amelia, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fury, tried to interrupt Liam, to deny his accusations, but her voice was drowned out by the murmurs of the crowd, the clicking of cameras, the collective gasp of disbelief. The journalists, sensing a major story, swarmed around them, their microphones thrust forward, their questions relentless. Vanessa and Amelia were trapped in a spotlight of their own making, their sins laid bare for all to see. The website Obsidian Unmasked was projected onto a large screen behind Liam, its contents amplified for maximum impact. The evidence was irrefutable, the documentation undeniable. It was a digital stake through the heart of their empire. Security guards moved to escort Liam off the stage, but he resisted, shouting his final words of defiance. "The truth is out. Let justice be served." As he was led away, the room erupted in chaos. Guests were whispering, pointing, and openly condemning Vanessa and Amelia. Investors were frantically calling their brokers, trying to salvage their portfolios. Lawyers were circling like vultures, sensing lucrative litigation opportunities. The charity gala, once a celebration of wealth and philanthropy, had transformed into a spectacle of disgrace and retribution. I watched as Vanessa and Amelia were surrounded by police officers, their hands cuffed behind their backs, their faces etched with shame and despair. Their reign of terror was over. As they were led out of the ballroom, their eyes met mine. In that brief, fleeting moment, I saw the full extent of their defeat, the utter devastation of their lives. There was no defiance, no arrogance, only a hollow emptiness, a chilling recognition of the consequences of their actions. The next few days were a whirlwind of media coverage, legal proceedings, and public outcry. The authorities launched a full-scale investigation into Vanessa and Amelia's activities, uncovering even more evidence of their criminal enterprise. Obsidian was seized, its assets frozen, its reputation irrevocably tarnished. Vanessa and Amelia were charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering, facing the prospect of years in prison. Their families disowned them, their friends abandoned them, their social circle vanished. They had lost everything: their wealth, their power, their status, their freedom. The once untouchable duo were now pariahs, shunned by society, reviled by the very people who had once admired them. My sister Sarah eventually learned of my involvement in exposing Vanessa and Amelia. As I expected, she was horrified by the lengths I had gone to, by the intensity of my anger and the ruthlessness of my plan. She questioned my motives, accusing me of being consumed by vengeance, of sacrificing my own happiness in pursuit of retribution. But she also recognized the injustice I had suffered, the pain and humiliation I had endured. In the end, she couldn't condone my actions, but she understood them. She saw the brokenness beneath my hardened exterior, the vulnerability that I had tried so hard to conceal. Slowly, tentatively, we began to rebuild our relationship, to heal the wounds that had been inflicted by Vanessa and Amelia's betrayal. It wasn't easy. The scars ran deep. But we were determined to move forward, to find peace and forgiveness, to reclaim our lives from the ashes of the past. The knowledge that they had been held accountable for their actions, that they had faced the consequences of their choices, brought a sense of closure. It didn't erase the pain, but it eased the burden. It allowed me to move on, to focus on the future, to rebuild my life on a foundation of honesty and integrity. As I watched Vanessa and Amelia's world crumble, as I witnessed their downfall, I felt a surge of satisfaction, a sense of justice served. They had taken so much from me, they had tried to destroy me, but I had emerged stronger, more resilient, more determined than ever. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.